few miles later, I noticed a woman. She wore an old white dress and stood motionless. Her skin was pale, and her eyes looked unnaturally dark.
My name is Ethan Carter, and for most of my life, I never believed in ghosts. I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, where old roads, abandoned barns, and dark forests were part of everyday life. People in my town loved telling scary stories, but I always laughed them off. That changed on a cold October night when I was 32 years old. I was driving home from a business trip around midnight. The fastest route was a lonely stretch known as Black Pine Road, a winding highway cutting through miles of dense forest. Locals avoided it after dark because of rumors about strange disappearances and unexplained accidents. I considered those stories nonsense, so I ignored the warnings and took the shortcut. About 20 minutes into the drive, my phone lost signal. The radio suddenly filled with static. Then, through the crackling noise, I heard what sounded like a woman whispering my name. I quickly changed stations, but every channel carried the same whisper. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as the voice grew louder. Then, the radio went completely silent. A few miles later, I noticed a woman standing on the side of the road. She wore an old white dress and looked completely motionless. Thinking she might need help, I slowed down. As my headlights illuminated her face, I felt a chill run through my body. Her skin was pale, almost gray, and her eyes looked unnaturally dark. Before I could stop, she suddenly turned her head toward me and smiled.
I panicked and accelerated away. In the rearview mirror, I expected to see her growing smaller in the distance. Instead, she was still there, standing in the middle of the road behind me, far closer than she should have been. I pressed harder on the gas pedal. Then, something appeared in the passenger seat. I nearly crashed. Sitting beside me was the same woman. Her head was tilted unnaturally, and she was staring directly at me without blinking. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded across the pavement and came to a stop. When I looked again, the seat was empty. Breathing heavily, I stepped out of the vehicle. The forest was silent. No insects. No wind. Nothing. Then, I heard footsteps crunching behind me. Slowly, I turned around. The woman was standing only a few feet away. I ran. I don't remember how long I sprinted through the woods. Branches tore at my clothes, and roots nearly tripped me with every step. Eventually, I spotted an old cabin hidden among the trees. Desperate for shelter, I rushed inside and locked the door. The cabin looked abandoned for decades. Dust covered every surface. Yet in the center of the room sat a wooden table with a single photograph resting on it. The picture showed the woman. My blood froze when I noticed the date written on the back, October 17, 1958. Beneath it were the words, "Missing. Last seen on Black Pine Road." At that moment, heavy footsteps began circling outside the cabin. The floorboards creaked. Something scratched against the walls. Then came a knock. 3 slow knocks. I stayed perfectly still. Another 3 knocks. Then a voice whispered from the other side of the door, "Ethan, let me in." I had never told anyone my location. There was no way anyone could know I was there. The knocking continued for hours. Sometimes it sounded like a woman. Sometimes it sounded like a child. Sometimes it sounded exactly like my own voice. Just before sunrise, everything stopped. When daylight finally arrived, I opened the door and found the forest completely empty.
Relieved, I made my way back to the road and eventually reached town. Later that day, I visited the local historical society and asked about the photograph. The elderly clerk stared at me in shock. He explained that the woman in the picture was named Sarah Whitmore. She had vanished on Black Pine Road in 1958. Search teams never found her body.
Then he showed me something that still haunts me. A newspaper clipping from the following year. Another driver had disappeared on the same road. His name was Ethan Carter. My name. The same name. The same age. The same birthday. To this day, I refuse to drive near Black Pine Road. Sometimes, late at night, my phone rings from an unknown number. When I answer, I hear nothing but faint static. And somewhere beneath that static, a woman whispering my name.
My name is Ryan Mitchell, and for years I refused to tell anyone what happened to me in the forests of Northern Oregon. People would either laugh at me or assume I was making up stories for attention. But I know what I saw. I know what followed me out there. And even now, almost 8 years later, I still sleep with the lights on. It happened during the summer of 2018. I was 27 years old and loved hiking alone. I had spent years exploring remote trails, and I considered myself experienced enough to handle almost any situation. One Friday afternoon, I decided to spend the weekend camping deep inside a section of forest that locals rarely visited. The area wasn't officially closed, but there were very few marked trails, and most people stayed away because hikers occasionally reported hearing strange sounds at night. I thought those stories were nothing more than wildlife noises being misunderstood by nervous campers.
I arrived around 4 in the afternoon and hiked nearly 6 miles into the wilderness before setting up camp near a small clearing. Everything felt normal at first. The forest was beautiful, peaceful, and incredibly quiet. Too quiet, actually. As the evening went on, I realized I hadn't heard birds, squirrels, or any of the usual sounds that fill a forest. It was as if every living thing had disappeared. The silence made me uncomfortable, but I convinced myself I was imagining it. Around midnight, I woke up suddenly. I wasn't sure why at first. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling my tent. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The sound moved carefully around me, as if someone was studying the tent from every angle. I grabbed my flashlight and called out, assuming another camper had gotten lost. The footsteps immediately stopped. Complete silence followed. I waited several minutes before finally unzipping the tent and shining my light outside. There was nobody there. The forest looked empty. Yet the ground around my campsite was covered in fresh footprints. The strange thing was that the footprints didn't look human. They were shaped almost like human feet, but far too long and narrow. The toes were unusually thin, and each print seemed much deeper than a normal person's footprint should have been. I told myself it was some kind of animal and tried to go back to sleep.
The next morning, things became even stranger. While making breakfast, I noticed a pile of small stones arranged in a perfect circle just outside my campsite. I hadn't placed them there. I was absolutely certain of that. As I examined the circle, I found something sitting in the center. A photograph. The photograph showed my tent. I dropped it immediately. The picture had clearly been taken during the night while I was sleeping inside. There was no date, no writing, nothing that explained who took it. My heart started racing. I packed my gear and decided to leave immediately. As I hiked back toward the trailhead, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Every few minutes, I would glance behind me and catch movement between the trees.
Not enough to identify anything, just brief flashes of something pale slipping behind trunks whenever I looked directly at it. Several hours later, I realized I was lost. The trail I had been following suddenly vanished. My GPS wasn't working. My phone showed no signal. No matter which direction I walked, I kept ending up near the same fallen tree covered in white fungus. At first, I thought I was making navigation mistakes. Then I noticed fresh footprints around the tree. The same footprints from the night before. By late afternoon, panic had set in. I knew enough about wilderness survival to understand how dangerous it was to become disoriented. I tried to remain calm and keep moving. That's when I heard someone calling my name. Ryan. The voice came from somewhere deep in the forest. I froze. The voice sounded exactly like my younger sister. The problem was that my sister was over 300 miles away. Ryan, over here. The voice came again. Every instinct told me not to follow it. Yet hearing a familiar voice in the middle of nowhere triggered something primal inside me. Against my better judgment, I started moving toward it. The voice led me deeper and deeper into the woods. Eventually, I reached a clearing unlike anything I had ever seen. The trees formed a perfect circle around a patch of dead ground. Nothing grew there. No grass, no flowers, nothing. Standing in the center was a figure. At first, I thought it was a person. Then it moved. Its limbs were too long. Its arms hung almost to its knees. Its skin looked pale gray, like wet ash. Most disturbing of all was its face. It didn't have one. Where its features should have been was a smooth surface of skin. I stood frozen. The creature slowly tilted its head toward me. Then, from somewhere inside that faceless head, I heard my sister's voice again. "Ryan, help me!" I ran. I've never run so hard in my life. Branches whipped across my face as I crashed through the forest. Behind me, I could hear footsteps matching my speed. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I caught brief glimpses of the thing, weaving effortlessly between the trees. It never seemed tired. It never fell behind. The chase continued until sunset. Then, I saw headlights. A narrow logging road appeared ahead, and a passing truck slammed on its brakes when it saw me stumbling out of the woods. I practically threw myself into the passenger seat. The driver looked shocked and asked what had happened. Before answering, I looked back toward the forest. Standing among the trees was the creature. The truck's headlights illuminated it clearly. This time, it had a face. My face. The exact same eyes. The exact same smile. The driver saw it too because his expression instantly changed. Without saying another word, he accelerated away from the area. Years later, I returned to Oregon and researched local folklore. Several old newspaper articles mentioned disappearances in that section of forest dating back more than a century. Survivors who escaped often described hearing voices belonging to loved ones. A few even reported seeing copies of themselves standing among the trees. I haven't gone camping since that day. But the worst part isn't what happened in the forest. The worst part is what happened after. Every few months, usually late at night, I wake up to find muddy footprints outside my bedroom window. Long, narrow, not quite human. And every single time, there is one set of footprints leading toward my house, but none leading away.